From yesterday, not yesterday, seems like yesterday. Last week, who can remember last week's message, what it was called?
Leave your baggage at the door.
Leave your baggage at the door. Did everybody do that on the way in? The people are giggling, laughing. No, obviously not. It's a hard thing to do, isn't it? It's a hard thing to do. I want to go on a little bit from that theme today, and I want to talk about keep your opinion to yourself. In a way, I like these catchy titles because they get people's attention, and then people think, oh, I'm a little bit offended by that. Because why? Because I like to give my opinion, don't we all? You know, so when we're slapped in the face with keep your opinion to yourself, it's a bit of a something we react to. And that's why I do titles like that, because I want us to react to it. Because I don't want anybody going out that door today the same way as they came in. Because we've all got a little bit of a way to go to be more like Jesus. I don't know about you, but I've got a long way to go to be anything like Jesus. So if we can come to church 52 times a year and leave the door a little bit more like Jesus, I'll be happy if I can do that. So, you know, I look at Jesus, and if I digress, I'll digress. But I look at Jesus, there were so many times that Jesus had the opportunity to give his opinion, and his opinion was always right, but he chose not to. And his ministry flowed, his ministry went, and he got to the point he did, and he's where he is now, partly because a lot of the time he didn't give his opinion, because if he'd given his opinion too early, he would have been crucified too early, or just stoned, or just killed, or just gone. But you see, Jesus had a mission. Jesus didn't come to take sides. Jesus came to take over. He didn't come to take sides. He came to take the whole lot, to take over. And now we know there's only two sides. There's his side and there's the other side. And thankfully, you know, I hope everybody in this room today is on his side. And if you're not yet on his side, please look into Jesus. Come and talk to me. Talk to a trusted Christian that you know. And ask more about Jesus, because he's on the winning side. I want to look at the Apostle Paul today, because he's an example that I can relate to better than Jesus. You know, people say we need to all be like Jesus. And I look at Jesus, and yeah, I know I need to be like Jesus, but I sort of pick a few guys out of the Bible that I've got more likely chance to be like than Jesus, because for me, he's out of my reach. He's above my pay grade. He's Jesus. He's the Son of God. So I like to take other guys in the Bible and say, well, maybe I could be a bit more like them, because they did a really good job. Yes, I do want to be like Jesus, but, you know, I realise I'll never get anywhere near being like Jesus. So as Paul, this Apostle Paul, this bloke, he began life, he had some baggage. And we know a lot about his life. He started out hating people of the way, hating Christians. He was a Pharisee. He was highly educated. He was a Roman citizen. And he was so far different to what Jesus needed him to be for the mission that he had to do on earth, that Jesus actually had to sort of like blind him and have a supernatural encounter to get his attention, because nothing else would have done. He was on a mission to destroy Christianity, and he was on a mission to destroy the memory of Jesus, a bit like what we looked at last week. Remember the Romans, the government on one side and the temple on the other side, just trying to crush these people of the way. He was one of them. He was one of them. He had license to do what he wanted. So he lived his whole life following this set of rules. He was a disciplined man, and you read, his whole life was disciplined. His whole life was disciplined. I don't know about you, but I tend to like a bit of discipline in my life. I get very uneasy when I haven't got a bit of a discipline, a bit of a plan. I'm a diary man. I've got a diary. Monica knows I'm always telling her, always having, you know, she hasn't got a diary, and I sort of say, honey, if you wrote it in your diary, you wouldn't lose it on that piece of paper. You know, so, because I panic if I write something on a piece of paper, because I think I'm going to lose that. So I hunt around for my diary to write it in there, or I put it on my phone. I've got Google everything, and it just tells me what, I check in the morning what I'm doing. And I checked the other morning, I had to go to the dentist, you know, and that was a little bit depressing. And I said to the girl, she said, how are you today? I said, I was fine till I checked my calendar this morning and I found out I was coming here. But I'm like that. I need that sort of discipline to keep me going. I'm much happier now in my new role, my new job. I know when I'm working, and when I'm not working, my family knows I'm a lot more relaxed now, because I work Monday I'll work for the school. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday I work for the church. Friday I work for the school. Sunday I work for the church. And I know what I'm doing every day, and I feel really good in that I know what I'm doing. Saturday I do whatever I like. Don't call me, please. But I get to go shooting again now and all sorts of stuff that I didn't do before. But this having laws and rules around just like that, it helps me. I don't know about you, but see, Paul was a guy like this. He had these laws and rules, and he felt very comfortable in following the old Mosaic traditions and the laws and all that. As a Pharisee, he thrived on these laws. So when Paul became a Jesus follower, what he did, and listen to this, please, in context with the last message last Sunday, the 3 before that on covenant. Don't hear me wrong. Don't take me out of context. Because what Paul did, he swapped his law as a Pharisee for a new law. He swapped it for a new law because that's how he lived. Paul learnt to live his new life by a new law that enabled him to go on with the things that Jesus had called him to do. And just after I've destroyed the law in my, the last 4 or 5 messages, hear me right when I say Paul, because Paul used this idea in the Bible that nobody else used. Paul used a phrase that nobody else used. He calls it, what he lives by, he calls it the law of Christ. So he was a man who was under discipline and knew what he was doing every minute of every day, under this schedule and under a law. He knew what to eat, what he couldn't eat, when to go, when he had to work, when he didn't have to work, and all of that. So he swapped that law for the law of Christ, and he's the only one that uses that term in the Bible. He chose to live by the law of Christ. So I guess you'd ask, what is the law of Christ? We've just, like I say, we've come off a series showing there is no law in Christ. So have we got the first John 13:34 to 35, it says this. I don't know what it says up there. I'll read it out here because it could be different. Is it the same? Don't know, hopefully. I'll read it here anyhow. It says, so now I'm giving you, this is Jesus, a new commandment. He gave this to his disciples. This new commandment, love each other just as I've loved you. You should love each other. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So this is actually the law that Paul decided to live by. And I'll show you in another place where he used it. I think he used it 2 or 3 times. But how did he outwork this new commandment, this new law of Christ that he took on in his daily living? If you go to 1 Corinthians 9:19 to 21, I think it gives us a really good clue of how he did it. And it says this. And he starts off, he says, even though I am a free man with no master. So he understands his freedom in Christ. He says, I'm a free man with no master. He says, although I'm free, he says, I have become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. When I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. When I was with those who followed the Jewish law, remember that's the Mosaic covenant, I too lived under that law. Even though I'm not subject to the law, the Mosaic covenant, he lived under it when he was with other people that were subject to it. He said, I did this so I could bring to Christ those who are under the law, Jews. When I'm with the Gentiles who do not follow the Jewish law, the old Mosaic covenant, I too live apart from the law so I can bring them to Christ. But I do not ignore the law of God. I obey the law of Christ. This is huge. If you can get your head around this and understand this, this law of Christ that Paul spoke of. This is, if you like, when Jesus said, I'll give you a new commandment. This is the new law. Paul is saying he comes in and out of following the Mosaic law, the Torah, depending on who he's with. If he's with a Jew, he does. If a Gentile, he doesn't. So it's not, what he's doing here, he's not bringing, one of the huge things he's doing here, not bringing attention to himself. This is where I got the title, Keep Your Opinion to Yourself. Because Paul, this is the strength of what he's done with these people. He's kept his opinion to himself. When he's with others that still live under the law, what does he do? He comes in under it with them. And he knows how to live that. He lived that for most of his life. So he just comes and he doesn't say a word. He just comes in under that and lives with them and is accepted by them. And he says, all the while not ignoring the law of God. He never ignores the law of Christ, which is love each other, just as I've loved you, Jesus said. So he can come into the law and love others, just as Christ loved him. He can come out into the Gentiles without any law and love others, just as Christ loved him. And he's still living by what he calls the law of Christ. Going on, he says in 22 to 23, he says, when I'm with those who are weak, I share their weakness, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. There's all sorts of, doctrinal things of, theological things of what we would call weak in there, but I prefer to just call it weak. It's more human, than talking about weak in belief and weak in understanding and weak. When I'm with those who are weak, I share their weakness. I just love that. The best thing you can do when somebody's weak is share in their weakness. If somebody's suffering, to share in their suffering. To have a heart for that person. I used to turn that all into a theological thing of, understanding and all that. But it's not. Well, it is. It could be. You make it whatever you want. But I just love it that when he's with the weak, he shares with the weak. When somebody's mourning, you don't laugh. When you share. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, he says. Doing everything I can save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share its blessings. Paul, he wrote a letter to the Galatian church, and he said this in Galatians 6:2-3. He said, share each other's burdens. And I think that aligns in with when I'm with those who are weak, I share in their weakness. He says, share each other's burdens. And in this way, there it is again, obey the law of Christ. If you think you're too important to help someone, you're only fooling yourself. You're not that important. I love that. You're not that important. Our motto here at church is connect with God, care for others, change yourself. This is part of that. Don't fool yourself. You're not that important that everything needs to be about you. We're never too important to help someone else, to share in someone's weakness. Notice these two examples where Paul talks about the law of Christ, that always the focus is taken away from him and put onto others. Well, the law of Christ is always focused on others, the care for others. When the concerns of others concern us and we act on it, I believe we're fulfilling the law of Christ. That's what the law of Christ is. When the concerns of others affect us and we act on it, we're fulfilling the law of Christ. At first you could look at Paul, and some people look at Paul and think, well, you could think he's wishy-washy, he can't make up his mind, just decide to live one way, decide to live in freedom and, and tell everybody who's under the bondage of the law that they shouldn't be living that way anymore. And who's been guilty of that? Yeah, a couple. Tell everybody else how they should live because you found the best way to live. We could think he's wishy-washy. You should be just telling them that. All these people are under bondage of the law. Why don't they just tell them about their freedom? Well, if you know anything about human nature, are they going to listen? Of course they're not going to listen. They're going to go to their grave like that. He's chosen a different way. He just conforms to the people around him at the time to fit in. He's made up his mind how he's going to live. He's going to live by the law of Christ, but he's going to fit in with whoever's there. What Paul was actually very determined, very disciplined, as he points out in his other writings. Paul's the guy who beats himself and all that sort of stuff. He's very, very disciplined and determined. He was single-minded and determined to know nothing but Christ and him crucified, he says somewhere, but also to live out and obey the law of Christ. And that's what he's doing. He's going into these situations. He says, I'm going to know nothing but Christ and him crucified, and I'm going to obey the law of Christ, which is love others as Christ has loved me. He's determined in this. He's determined in this. He's determined to keep his opinion to himself. What Paul was able to do in keeping his opinion to himself went at the times that mattered the most, and therefore he was able to immerse himself into other people's lives, into other people, so that he could see their opinions. Leaving beside his opinion, he immersed his life into other people's lives so that he could see their opinions. And once he saw their opinions, he could minister to their needs. Single-minded. Have you ever noticed sometimes you give your voice of a differing opinion in a situation? Have you noticed what normally happens is conversation stops? If your opinion is different, or I've got to go now, I've got an appointment. I've got to go to the dentist. Because, if differing opinion, but Paul was strong enough and self-secure enough, or not self-secure, but secure enough in Christ not to have to give his opinion in every situation. And I'm not talking about, look, if you have to give your opinion, you have to give your opinion, but I think 99% of the time you don't have to give your opinion. And I think it's useful, like what I've learned from Paul, it's useful not to. Paul never changed his belief. He never changed his discipline on major things. But what he did here is he gained an insight into other people's lives by striving to find common ground with them. Striving to find common ground with them. And when you live with others, when you live in the common ground of other people, you learn why they're like that. I've had a few conversations recently with a few people that have just opened my eyes to some situations that I believed so firmly and so strongly on. I still do. I haven't changed my mind on those things, the things that are going around in politics and all that sort of stuff. But I've talked to people who are actually on the ground facing some of these situations, and now I understand a little bit the other side. Whereas before I was just, no, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. I still think it's wrong, but now I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I see where you're coming from. I never saw that before because I was just going in, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. But I've had the ability to be able to sit down and say, tell me how you see it. And I thought, oh wow, I've never heard of that, never seen that. Paul was able to open his mind, open his hands, open his heart to people who thought differently to him. That's a skill. That's a skill. To open our mind, open our hands, open our hearts to people that think differently to us. Imagine if we could open our minds, open our hands, open our hearts to people who thought differently to us while at the same time obeying the law of Christ. That's what Paul was doing. But I've got a little warning for myself and anyone else who wants to come down this road. The danger is, we see it as a danger, there's a possibility that we may change our minds on the way. We may change some of our opinions on the way when we begin to understand how other people think, why they think that way. We can open ourselves up to see things from other people's point of view and standing and where they sit and where they stand, which is a whole nother thing I haven't got time to go on. We stand on something because of where we've sat, our upbringing, our parents, our hurts, our pains, our everything else. That's the reason we stand on some things and we get so into some things. It's because of where we've been, where we've sat for so long. Okay, one of my favourite sayings, I won't go there. One of my favourite sayings is this. I said it last week. I said you have to have an opinion on things. You have to have an opinion on things because without an opinion, you've got no opportunity to change your opinion. And I think that you've got to have an opinion on most things. I'm very opinionated. I've got opinions on just about everything. But I'm open to change. I hope I'm open to change. Show me a better way and I'll change. I just want to give you a quick mud map on how to start. Or if you're already on this road, good for you. I think we all are to a little bit. But I want to give us a bit of a mud map, where to go, how we can do this better, so that we can immerse ourselves, so that we don't have to go overseas or in some underground subculture in Australia to find people that think differently to us, that have different opinions. We can start this journey today in this room. Like I said last week, everybody thinks differently. Everybody thinks differently. We can start today by concentrating on 3 things with each other in the family of God. We've all got different opinions on so many different things. I want to give 3 things quickly. Number 1, we can listen. Number 1, we can listen. And, I've said so many times before, how many ears, how many mouths? Let's use them in that proportion. Let's listen at least twice as much as we talk. And listen to people. Listen to people who don't experience the world the same way you do. Listen to people who are not like you. If you're old, listen to young people. If you're young, listen to old people. If you're Christian, listen to non-Christians. If you're non-Christian, listen to Christians. If you're married, listen to singles. If you're gay, listen to straight people. If you're straight, listen to gay people. If you're rich, listen to poor people. If you're poor, listen to rich people. If you're educated, listen to less educated. And if you're less educated, listen to educated people. Listen to people not like you. Listen to people that don't think like you. We've got a blessing of different cultures in the room too. We've got some Filipino culture, some Khmer culture. You know, they think, I see them and I just think food. I told them that last week. I said, I look at you ladies and I just get hungry. And Sam said, why, do we look delicious? I said, but yeah, we've got such a blessing, such different, you know, we've all come from different, oh, it's one over there too. Some Chinese culture in the corner, yeah. Now I'm really hungry. But let's talk about different things. I love my upbringing. You know, I could never be racist. I was raised by, mum was German, dad was Palestinian, had a stepmother who was Filipino. I had all the good food, you know, but I could never think, you know, I cut ties with somebody because they were just talking racist comments about, you know, like Asians, and I just thought, I'm never going to talk to that person again. I just don't need it, you know, because it's just ridiculous. You know, we can learn so much from each other. So that's one, listen, just listen. You know, ask one question and then listen. Number two, learn. Pay attention to what you hear. Be more of a student than a critic. You know, listen to understand. I want to learn from this. Don't criticise it in your mind. Learn. Like, just think, why? Ask more questions. And, you know, this one, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. We need to put that up somewhere. Just learn. Ask questions. Refrain from statements like, I don't agree. Don't say, I don't agree. Say, can you explain to me why you think that way? I have trouble understanding why you think that way. Can you explain to me why you think that way? You know, rather than say, I don't agree. If they ask your opinion, if and when they ask your opinion, give it respectfully. You don't say, I think you're wrong. Just say, well, I see it this way. Respectfully. Here's something I recently learned. This really challenged me. Every time I say something, even in my thought process, maybe not out loud, even every time I say something like, I don't know how anybody could believe that. And I've said that a lot. Or I've said, I don't know how anybody could act that way. I was really challenged because you know what that exposes in me? It exposes my ignorance. That's all that's doing, is exposing my ignorance to a situation. Instead of saying, I don't know how anybody, what I should be saying is, I need to learn. How can they think that way? I need to learn, how can they act that way? Rather than, you know, Paul didn't do it, Jesus didn't do it. I've got to admit I've got something new to learn. It should be my objective to learn why people believe that way, why people act that way. Not that's what it should be. And the third one, so I've got L. Isn't that good? L. Listen, learn. Third one is love. We should never burn a relational bridge over a different opinion. But we see it time and time again. Never burn a relational bridge over a different opinion. How many families are fractured or broken over different opinions? How many churches are split over different opinions? But okay, let's do a show of hands on this one. Who here has ever changed your opinion on anything? So we're all fluid in our opinions. We've all changed our opinions on things. So that just tells me if we've all changed our opinions on things, you know, I need to understand how can we have divisions over opinions. It's silly, for lack of a better word. Our opinions, I believe, should always be changing. That's called growing. That's called developing. That's called maturity. If your opinions aren't regularly changing, even just a little bit, you're not growing. You're not maturing. You're not, you know, you've heard me said before, I get frustrated with people that did all their Bible study in 1980 when I did, and theology's moved on, people. We know a lot more now. You know, people come up with these little cliches. Let's move on. Let's learn more. Let's keep going. Let's fill our minds with the things of Christ that he's revealing today. I always come back to something St. Augustine said, and many of you have heard me say this before. In essentials, we must have unity. In non-essentials, liberty. And in all things, love. In all things, love. The longer I walk with Christ, the older I get, I find the more and more things that I once used to believe were essential are not as essential as I thought they were. I just keep adding to the list of things that, oh man, I thought that was important, that you needed to understand what I think about that. And they're just getting less and less and less and less. And this emphasis of love in all things is just getting more and more and more. Not just because I'm old and friends around me my age are starting to die. I think it's a bit of maturity as well. We haven't got much time. We don't know how much time we have got, and we haven't got much time. Let's just leave it at that. We haven't got much time. We don't know how much time we have got, but we haven't got much time. You know, years ago we had a girl who played keyboard. She was 16. And she was on her way back to Adelaide and crashed at Port Wakefield and never came back again. She passed away. 16. But what are we going to focus on? Are we going to focus on having to get our opinion across? Or are we going to listen to the 16-year-old keyboard player?